process, and this particular thing comes up. And so we are very excited to hit the nail on the head.
Yes.
So that you guys can have clarity. But also, if you're not in our office, if you're on a healing journey, this is going to serve you so well to understand what retracing is.
I love talking about this.
This is so important. So just like flatly, retracing is basically like reliving pain, memories, like re-experiencing or reliving pain, memories, or emotions when you're on your healing journey. It could be something that you're like, oh my gosh, I have neck pain and I haven't had neck pain in like 15 years or 6 years, whatever it may be. That is actually retracing. It can be that I used to have headaches when I was a teenager and now 30 years later I have headaches, or back pain that I had last month, it's back again. That's so strange. Why am I getting worse? You know what I mean? So we're going to go into this.
And I think why it's so unique in what you're saying is because I think when people start a healing journey, they think it's just going to be this uphill trajectory.
And then you arrive somewhere
yes,
and nothing
it never happens again. And you're good to go and scotch-free.
We all thought that.
Yeah, and I think we've just had so many of these conversations that we just really, like Monica said, want to hit the nail on the head of what is retracing, why does it happen, and what can we do when it comes up. So,
yes.
We had a really good chat about this before, and I was actually just even talking to our office manager, Roseanne, about this. Whenever these things come up, I almost have it as like a celebrated experience. And she was like, why? And I'm like, this is my opportunity. Because I think that a lot of people, when they think about healing in general, like these things are stored within our body, whether we know it or not. And then they find these moments or these opportunities when we have the space, the capacity to actually process them once and for all. So do you want to dive into what it is?
Let's dive into it. I'm going to give you guys also examples, and like she said, we're going to end with tips about if this happens, what exactly to do in those moments so you can just move through it with grace, high five yourself, and be basically on to the next chapter. So when we are, our culture, let's just say we've all been conditioned to think that symptoms are horrible. It's something we always want to push away. So we have to kind of have that as like the overarching thing of what we're saying, because the conditioning of it is also the issue when retracing happens, that when something negative or bad comes up, we are like discouraged and angry and push it away, and we don't want to look at it or feel it, which is something we're going to go into in a little bit. But retracing in itself is that when we're going through our life, and if something stressful happens, and stress is an umbrella term that can mean anything. It could be physical stress, mental, emotional stress, chemical stress. If we haven't fully processed it, which is hard at sometimes, maybe they're really big experiences, or we just had a lot going on when something smaller happened and we weren't able to fully process it. So we kind of just like shoved it down and like hoped that maybe it would kind of go away. Retracing is that when you are on your healing journey, old things that you may have experienced or actually did experience actually come up for full integration and full healing. Like perfect, like gone. Like, so that's how I see it.
I think like finding balance with the experience is how I see it, like where it's not triggering anymore. But there is something really crazy that's different between humans and animals that I think really makes...
I love your animal example.
Yeah, I think this really makes it really unique for people on a healing journey. But there's a leading person in somatic bodywork, and somatic essentially just means that experiences that we have, emotions that we have can be stored within our body. That's simply all it means. But somebody asked him, why do animals not have PTSD? Why do animals not have anxiety? Because they go through way more stress. And there was this example of, it was like a mother bear, when she goes to like protect her cubs, the amount of adrenaline that goes through her body is like way more than the average human ever experiences. But afterwards, why does she not have PTSD the next time a bear comes? She's almost more ready the next time a big bear comes to attack her family. And what this guy was saying was that essentially animals allow themselves to go through the entire cycle of the emotion, where something stressful happens, a male bear comes to attack her bear cubs. She is able to be in the moment, fully present, allow it to happen, allow it to move through her, and then she has the space, the time to integrate afterwards. Because all this is an experience that was, for whatever reason, outside of our bandwidth at the time. And our body, humans, they don't allow that entire process to go through, or that entire cycle to complete itself. So
why not?
I mean, many reasons probably. I think you nailed it with conditioning, but it's like, it's too overwhelming, too stressful, I have to pick up my kids.
Feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or just like, I don't want to look at it. And it's kind of a natural response because I think we're conditioned to kind of just keep moving through our day rather than pause and let that experience actually process. But our body is super smart. And it's like, hey, I'm not going to let you just keep walking around with this unintegrated stress that is on a micro level all day long. It's like, I'm going to take this, put it in your back pocket, kind of accumulate it onto your nervous system for whatever reason until you're ready to process it. And that's when the retracing unfolds, I believe, where people under this care, at least, or starting any kind of healing journey, it's like their body was holding all these stressors, maybe subconsciously. Maybe they had a headache once every month and it lasted for 10 days, and they start coming to see us, and all of a sudden the headaches will go away. Or they'll have headaches one time a week for a very fraction of a time. But our body is really smart, and it's actually going to start, I think about bandwidth as like a threshold kind of. And if a situation happens within our bandwidth, we process it beautifully. It's easy. It's kind of no big deal. We move on and we're like, great memory. Anything that happens outside of our bandwidth kind of sticks within us. And when we start healing, that bandwidth starts processing some of this stuff. And not only does it start processing some of this stuff, it's because this bandwidth can actually start opening up and getting bigger. So when we have a healing journey, when somebody lays on the table, like with that animal, they're feeling safe for the first time. They have an expanded bandwidth. They're regulated. All the blood is pumping how it should, the oxygen, and their body's like, hey, we have this stuff that's been accumulated, and for us to make that next level of our healing journey, we've got to unload this. And then all of a sudden, a headache might come up, or an old symptom, or an old memory even, because it's not just symptoms that we're talking about. But I think it's a really beautiful and divine way that our body does this.
And an example that you guys will totally probably understand, it's probably happened to you, someone you know, is that when you go on vacation,
That's a great example.
so many people that they're, going, they're on vacation, and all of a sudden that vacation, they're either super sick, super fatigued, or just kind of out for the count because their system finally has an opportunity to process all of these things that they've been ignoring that have been stored up. And the system's like, hey, yo, now I have space. Let's go over this. And that can sometimes not be the most convenient, but that's how healing happens. So if the lesson in that is if we took time to like heal and process, like the bear example, okay, I'm not chasing someone trying to get my kids or attack me or anything like that. But something like a very stressful experience, driving or whatever, afterwards, I need to take time to feel what I'm feeling, tune into my body, rest when I need to rest. This is all, again, cultural conditioning that we don't rest. We kind of push, if something feels uncomfortable, like a icky conversation with somebody. When I leave, I kind of just don't want to think about it. I just kind of put it behind. Whereas if you can just feel it, oh, that's uncomfortable. Oh, I got to give myself grace. That's not how I would have responded. But how did I grow from this? Because every experience that we haven't processed in the moment is actually for us, which is why your body like slides it in your back pocket. So it's like, hey, when we have space, which happens through our process when the nervous system's bandwidth opens, like Erica said, that's when we can begin to pull these things out of our pocket to actually process so we can grow and become wiser and more whole and more complete.
And it's like, it's for you. You can keep walking around with that like rock in your shoe, so to speak. But like eventually, if you want to start running marathons, if you want to start moving your body appropriately, like those little rocks are going to start to matter. And I think that's what everybody wants, is their life to be in a state of like coherence, where no matter where I'm at, no matter what I'm doing, I am grounded, I am centered, I can handle all this outside of me. But if you can imagine like those small drops in the bucket accumulating day in and day out, when somebody goes through a healing process, it's almost like that bucket has to relieve itself almost, because we're going into those parasympathetic rest and digest tones where our body is geared to regenerate. It's geared to let go of these things. So when this stuff comes up, I tell people it's not like starting over, because I think that also is, people are like, I have a headache again. And I'm like, when was the last time you, like, what did this look like before? And I ask people like the number one question, like, what has changed with it? Because old patterns running on autopilot and retracing are completely different. Yeah. And I think that whenever people go through a healing journey, it's like, what's changing? The intensity, the duration, maybe even the symptoms, but things start changing when people start retracing, excuse me. So do we want to go into that? Do we want to talk about?
I want to quickly give an example that will just help the situation of understanding retracing, but also retracing
Yeah.
versus pattern. So we have a client under care who has had many jobs the past 10 years. And so I would say the first 7 jobs she was telling me about, it was the same situation every time. When she first got to this new job, she was super excited, new possibilities. And then the same things kept happening, that she felt really undervalued, underpaid. She felt like it was like a hostile coworker environment where she didn't feel safe. She kind of dreaded being there, like her stress levels were off the chain, essentially, in a bad way. Off the roof, I mean. Off the chain, that works too. And then she got a new job. Same thing. Oh, this is going to be different this time. I'm so excited. Same situation. She, again, wasn't getting paid enough for what she was doing. Maybe she was going above and beyond and wasn't valued for that. The toxic work environment ensued, left that job again. And so what this process through our care, and it was like about 3 months under our process here, and she was saying, she was like, now I'm aware of what is happening, and I'm actually talking to the president and telling him I actually deserve more. And it's like actually interrupting the pattern. And so that was a pattern that is now becoming healing. And so the retracing for that example was that if she does get another job, she could have maybe some residual experiences similar to that, I would
think
say.
of like attracts like when you say that. Like that client goes through an experience, she has a certain vibration, a certain frequency, and all of those life experiences are adding to that frequency. And then she goes through her life, and time again, she keeps attracting the same experience essentially in harmony with that vibration. And when someone does that, I think about like bandwidth. If we're not aware of it, we kind of just keep running through the same reaction. As our bandwidth starts opening up, we get so much more awareness that she actually recognizes like, hey, not wanting this for my life anymore.
Not doing this anymore.
Not loving
Which
this.
we all do to some degree, not just in the work environment, like relationships, everything, motherhood.
We choose our lives. But when that experience comes up, it's almost like the opportunity to start responding to it from a different vibration, a different attraction place, so that we can start attracting different experiences. Because if that keeps living within her, it's like, it doesn't matter where you go, there you are, basically, and the same experience. But I think that when these things come up, they're actually like an opportunity, because if you want the same old, keep doing the same old that you've always done. That's the definition of insanity as well, by the way, of keep doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. I think that when people start going through this healing process, it's normal where those experiences, now they actually are inside our bandwidth, but they elicit almost the same response they did when she first started this job. 7, however long ago it was, 7 jobs ago. It's like the same reaction comes up in her brain, even though she's a completely different person. She's much more adaptable now, much more resilient. And with that new level of vibration, that new level of being, she gets to choose who does she want to be in that moment to stop attracting that same pattern.
I also like that in our pre-talk before we got here, you were speaking about layers. So I wanted you to get into that.
And I think this is like really deep, but just to simply say it, when our nervous system starts healing, I think about it like a stress that happens, like that mom bear, for example, like our body does this stress response where all those fibers start, all our muscles start tensing, like something happens and I'm like,
and within the chemicals within the body too.
It's like like a whole
cocktail,
it's like physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, these things affect us. But I just think about like tension. But something stressful happens, tension happens. We don't go back into that parasympathetic state. We don't regulate. We don't do all the things. Another stressful thing happens and we get more tension and then more. And when that starts happening, we start adapting, I guess, because our body's always adapting to that pattern or that stimulus rather than adapting to our natural state of being, our natural normal responses. So as these things start unlayering, so to speak, it's kind of like the first layer might just be like, wow, I'm feeling less tension. And then as I regulate, and this is why we talk about momentum so much too, because that old pattern likes the familiar past. It wants to attract those situations. We start seeing people a little bit more regularly, and then all of a sudden they let go a little bit and they start breathing up, or their chest opens up a little bit, and then more regulation, and we have a little bit more letting go and a little bit more letting go and letting go. And to know that we're on a trajectory of healing, there should be some ups and downs. But with those ups and downs, as we start unlayering some of this stuff, it should be different every single time. If it's the same thing time and time again, nothing's changing, we're probably not geared in the direction of regeneration. We may be ingraining this pattern in a deeper way. So I think whenever the nervous system starts healing, it does it in a way of whatever we can handle in that moment, whatever we're ready to process, whether it's just the thought of that experience. Maybe it's just like a physical sensation that we're ready to let go of. Our body is super smart. And when people lay on the tables, they ask me like, will this elicit that memory? Or I'm like, your body is way more smart than me. I don't know what you're ready to process, but whatever comes up for you now in this moment is that 1% shift that you need. Where I think about like that, it's like if something really big happens, like a really big experience, like people talk about like ayahuasca and like really big journeys for themselves that almost like crack the egg completely open. And then they need to process days, weeks, months later because the retracing ensues in small amounts. And I think about like really big spikes like that would be like almost a big journey. Whereas our process is so gradual, so gentle, and makes them so graceful. Yeah. Makes these micro shifts where our body, the spikes are like that. Something that we can actually process, actually integrate. So whenever this thing starts opening up, it's not just a ripping, that saying too, like you break open a lotus that's broken open never blooms or flowers. It's like it has to open in its own time, its own way, and that may come.
That's a good example.
The lotus.
Yeah, I've never heard that. I like that.
Whenever somebody asks you to be vulnerable about something, I'm like, a lotus forced open never flowers. But it's hilarious. Like, we can't predict that, but it happens in layers. And whenever something's happening for me or something's unwinding is what I call it now, I look for what is different. And I actually do hope for those micro shifts rather than the macro shifts now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. And the micro leads to the macro.
Yes.
So as we're talking about all these things, you might be kind of thinking of, oh my gosh, this is actually retracing that's happening.
Yeah.
Whether it's something physical, mental, emotional, it can be so many different things, but your awareness of it is the most important part. So that is like tip number 1 of just like owning, retracing the healing journey is like becoming aware of like, okay, I have knee pain right now. This is actually very strange for me. When was the last time I had knee pain? Okay, I was 17. I had a bicycle accident. I really hurt my knee. I actually like broke it or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so the awareness of it and just kind of feeling into it and thinking about when the last time you had this was, what does it feel like? Does it feel the same? That is really important because most people don't think about anything other than, oh, it's knee pain. It's so inconvenient. I can't do what I need to do. Your body is asking you, you have space to actually fully integrate it. So it actually never comes back in the same way ever again. That's why we like celebrate, high five, our retracing, because it's like, okay, this is like the full completion of this pattern. Let's see it through kind of thing. So awareness is number 1, just really thinking about what's going on in your body. Is this new? Or is this something that has happened before? That's really, really important. And if it's new, that's great too, because that's change in the body. So that's a different story and a different video that we've done. We're going over the old retracing.
Yeah.
Tip number 2, what would you say?
Trusting the process. I think that when these things come up, people think that it is going to be like this forever, that this is bad, that this is me going back to old ways. And I'm like, if you really trust that your body is perfectly orchestrated and doing exactly what it's meant to, exactly what it needs to, don't you believe that this is also for you? Like the obstacle is the way kind of thing? Because I think it would be kind of crazy to think that if we went through like we can talk about like in relationships, if you go through a really maybe ugly time with someone and you just are like, okay, no more talking about that, gonna let it go, gonna forget about that. It's kind of like how trusting is that actually? It's like, I'm gonna walk on eggshells around this situation, not gonna really talk about it, not gonna maybe move my body in a certain way, have a certain kind of conversation that's gonna elicit that. And I think about that person is not living in a place of trust, not living in a place of this is happening for me, like this is being presented for me. But I think about the opposite of that. Whenever somebody maybe goes through a conversation that's tough, it's like, let's maybe just trust that that was meant to happen, and then how I respond differently to it. The same thing happens within our body as well. When stuff starts coming up, am I a teammate with my body, or do I completely go on the defensive, the opposite end of like, you're failing me and you're and you're breaking down? And I think that those are two very different energies.
And this goes back to the beginning of the cultural conditioning of like, I don't trust in my body. Like, again, like she was saying, knee pain, it's going to be here forever. Like this is always going to be there, or I need something from the outside in to fix this problem. So again, this is like we need to unwind how we have all been raised in this our whole culture. We all think that we've been broken. We don't trust in our bodies. We don't trust in life. And that's really what the biggest shift has been for me the past almost 20 years, is like trusting in my body, trusting in life. If I'm doing all the things that are leading me towards my greatest self, then all these things that are coming along the way are for me. And so that's what retracing is about. If that, like these people who are going through our process, number one, it's so good to have someone in your corner to remind you that, hey, you're doing the right thing. Keep going. Like, this is a good thing. High-fiving. Like, we celebrate changes, we celebrate retracing and things like that. So to have someone in your corner is really, really important. But if you are doing the things that you know are leading you towards where you want to go, then these things that come up are actually meant to be and actually for you to get there faster. So just the trust factor is really important when stuff like that comes up. So number one is awareness, number two is trust, and then number three is just continue being consistent. So something that, like, we're having a conversation and someone's like, this neck pain, it's back, like, oh my gosh. Hooray. This is retracing, this is the reminder that we've already talked about this, that old things can come up. Sometimes people forget. And then from there, it's like, this is good. This is moving in the right direction. Continue being consistent, which is the third tip that we have for you guys. So I say, make sure to get maybe a second session this week to help you move through it faster, because you already are. But if you just continue doing what you're doing, it just might last a little longer. So to help you get over the hump faster is just another session, and it works every time.
And I think it's hilarious when we say that to people, like in practicality, like they'll say like, my neck pain or back pain. I have a client that's like a construction worker dude, and he had been under care for a long time, like 2 years, no back pain, hadn't heard a peep of it. And the other day I was adjusting him and he's like, I have back pain. And I'm like, Matt, I'm really excited for you. And it was almost like he thought I was crazy for it. And I'm like, your body had been holding on to this pattern, because it would come up every once in a while, nothing like when he first came in. But I was almost like, oh, that is so awesome. And he was like, why? And I'm like, because I think that this is finally ready to fully move through your body, where in the past, I think that a lot of times he'd go through this and we would see him maybe once a week or once every other week, something like that. It would go away and then he'd wait, 2 more weeks to come see us. I was like, I think this time we should really double down, because your body loves the familiar past. And the same pattern of, I'm going to let this heal a little bit and then kind of get right back to doing, like, working on roofs and doing all kind of crazy stuff, like his day-to-day life. And then all of a sudden goes back down. And then he'd come in for another session and it was kind of like that, where I'm like, why don't we double down this week and do something a little bit different, where your body's already in the gears of regenerating, moving through this, and to create a new pattern, let's choose again and come in again so that we can start moving in the right direction. And whenever I said that to him, he's like, that really makes sense.
See, someone in your corner, which is why it's so important. That's why this is so important for anyone who's out there who's on a healing journey and they are experiencing things like that. Oh, it's like, that makes sense. Thank you for the reminder, or thank you for the clarity of what's going on in my body, because I didn't know. Like, I feel a little lost and confused. That's why we're doing these videos to begin with, just to add more information to our clients and our community from what we're already doing every single day in here. So retracing, again, in summary, is just a re-experiencing of old memories, pain, or emotions, something from the past that we haven't fully processed, haven't fully integrated. It's still stored within the system, and it's waiting for the right opportunity when our bandwidth is expanded to fully integrate, to fully process, to be literally of the past, that we don't have to even think about it anymore and expend our very precious energy on it. Like, whether we're thinking about it or our body is actually holding it in place, it's just time to let go. So that is the biggest thing, is understanding what it is. And this will happen in many shapes and forms along your journey. Number one is just to become aware of what those patterns are, what those things from the past are coming up as. Has this happened before? Is this new? Either way, if you're on a healing journey, yay, that's good. New or old things. And then number two, trusting in your body, trusting in life, that these things are meant for you. And it's actually a really, really good thing. And number three, continue being consistent, maybe even doubling down, like Erica said, or doing something different with that is the perfect recipe to fully move through it.
Yeah. And one last piece. It's not like that these things just because you weren't experiencing them, they were living under the surface. Like we're offloading these things in a really real way because, like Monica said, that's taking up energy too. And the second that we do process that, the second that we do move on, it really does open up that bandwidth where we can actually start to process the next thing and the next thing. And it's a gradual journey, and it is meant to come up, and it is perfectly for you.
And not only process old things, but also like, let's increase more in our life. Like, let's move forward in exciting ways, so we're not, you know what I mean? That's also what it's for. It's like two parts of the street.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for joining. We really trust that you have clarity. Maybe this is something you've never heard before, so you're like, oh, this is amazing, or a reminder if you have. Thank you so much for joining us. Please like, subscribe, share with a friend who also needs to hear this, and we will see you next time.